Hello, friend. This is Legal Design Thinking in Real Life, a live series provided by Lawyers Design School. And I'm your host, Hannele from Lawyers Design School. And today I'm here with Stéphanie Roy, and we'll cover a super interesting topic. We'll talk about the long-awaited ISO standard for plain language and how it can be effectively used in legal documents. And this is actually a perfect timing for this session, as the standard will be published in June. Hopefully, maybe Stephanie will talk more about that. And Stephanie has been closely involved in the drafting of the standard as the vice president of Clarity, that is an international association dedicated to promoting plain legal language around the world. And if you're watching this live, you can join the discussion with your questions and comments. But hello, Stephanie, and welcome.
Hi, Hannele. Nice to meet you. We've met just 5 minutes ago. Very nice to be here. Thank you.
Nice to meet you. Can you tell us, where are you joining us today?
Yes, I'm actually in Canada, Montreal. So it's 8 in the morning for me. My mother tongue is actually French, but I can speak English. Obviously, it's the second language in Canada, but much more comfortable in French, though.
Sure.
Yeah.
But hey, great to have you. Maybe we'll get started with your journey. Can you tell us a
Yes,
bit about yourself and how you got involved in plain language and
plain
also
language.
in legal design?
Yes, well, I've actually been a lawyer in Montreal for about 15 years now. I started my practice at the beginning, traditional practice in a big law firm in Montreal in business law. And decided after a while that the traditional practice of law wasn't exactly for me. I guess I never felt that I was really fitting in, but you have to start somewhere. So I've started in a law firm, learned a lot. And so I explored other ways of practicing law, other ways of using my legal knowledge in a way that would have a more meaningful purpose for me. And just life brought me to a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting access to justice and to creating plain legal information for the layperson. And that was the beginning for me of a passion, of a love story between law, me, and plain language. That's where I discovered actually plain legal language. So initially there, I was just, writing different articles on different legal subjects. But quickly I started to offer plain language drafting services or advice to public and private organization. For example, to an administrative tribunal, which wanted to create legal information on their website, for example. So I started to offer also a lot of trainings and workshops to private and public organizations, but also to adjudicators from administrative tribunals, judges from a superior court, a court of appeal in Quebec or in Canada. Actually, Canadian judges are doing an amazing job to try to write clearly and in a more accessible way. So after 8 years in that nonprofit organization giving, advices and services, I decided to co-found my own plain language and legal design agency with two partners. And actually, it's by being part of Plain Language International Conference that I discovered that there were plain language kind of agencies and professionals around the world. And so we've decided to co-found Clair, Service Conseil, Clair. And we are now 15 people working there after 7 years. So lawyers, UX designers, of course, graphic designers, expert in communication. And, 15 people mean the need is there, the demand is there from public and private organizations. So yes, and, now that I've been doing that for so many years, I think I understand better why I felt I didn't really fit in the traditional practice of law. I always felt when I worked there uncomfortable with the huge amount of legal documents and legal information we had to try to make sense of. Any lawyer who did due diligence, in corporate law, had to read so complex documents, insurance policies that you can't even really understand. And it just drove me crazy to be faced with this kind of infobasity and to experience all the time such a negative feeling. I felt that I didn't grasp well everything. So, I know now that there's a way not to only clarify a document, but an ecosystem of documents also, and build a positive and constructive legal experience. So that is my purpose today, and here I am.
Thank you for sharing. And that's so interesting because the theme that keeps coming up in these discussions with people working in legal design is this theme that I always felt like I didn't fit in the traditional lawyer work. So because we only met like 5 minutes ago, so I didn't know that side of you,
Yeah.
but it's really interesting that this keeps coming up. And I myself have that same experience. And also I thought that I was so simple myself that I can't make sense of those documents, and felt like a bad lawyer because of that. But now I
Exactly.
know that to make it simple is actually more difficult to make it than to make it
Exactly.
complex.
Exactly. And it usually comes from a need to understand things. I have this need to understand everything, though it kind of drives me crazy when I have to sign something that I don't understand, or when I feel that I'm just not going to read it because it's too long, I don't have time, and then whatever, I'm just going to sign it. It drives me crazy, and I don't think this is right. Things can be different. Yeah.
Before we go to the standard, can you, because we exchanged few words about the legal design and plain language. So you found plain language first, was that the case?
Yes.
And then you found out about legal design, or
yeah,
what was
because well, when I actually started working in plain language, we didn't hear about legal. I think plain language exists for about 40 or 50 years. There are some people in this community that have been thinking and writing about that for so many years, thinking about Professor Joseph Kimball. I'll talk about him later because he has amazing books on plain language. But and legal design is about 10 years. We've heard
years,
that so I think it's so I come from the plain language world first, but then got in the legal design world. And maybe we'll talk about it a bit later when we talk about what is exactly plain language. But plain legal language is not that different from legal design when you talk about creating clear and efficient documents. It's a methodology. Plain language, the expression plain language is kind of, it's maybe doesn't express this whole methodology, because you hear plain language, so you think words, you think sentences, you don't think user experience, you don't see interviews and all to get to know your readers, but it's part of plain language. And on the other hand, legal design, which is maybe a more efficient expression because we know about the design process, well, it's also a problematic expression because most of people think design is just graphic. We all know that in the legal design world. So both expressions have their problems. But the interesting thing is how do they meet actually? What is common about those two expertise, and are they that different? This is something I'll be thinking of these next month, because I was telling you we have an international plain language conference in Argentina in September, and plain language world and legal design world will be together in that conference, so we'll talk about that.
Oh, that's perfect. That's perfect that these worlds will meet and also like get together and share the expertise and experiences. But hey, let's talk about the standard. Can you tell us what exactly is the ISO standard for plain language, and why do you think it's important in the legal field?
Yeah, for those who don't know it, ISO stands for International Organization for Standardization. And when you go on their website, they tell you that the ISO was founded with the idea of answering this fundamental question: what's the best way of doing this? So, for example, what is the best way of doing a car seat for children? What is the best way to make it safe, reliable, of good quality? So you'll find ISO standards on road safety, on toy safety, and on secure medical packaging, for example. But on plain language, that might be actually surprising for some people. So the idea of a plain language standard first emerged in 2007 in an international plain language conference in Amsterdam. There was at that time an international consensus among international experts in plain language that having an ISO plain language standard would strengthen the field of plain language, its credibility and its seriousness, since ISO standards are based on research, on a rigorous process, on global experts' opinion and consensus. We'll get back to the process afterwards. And we had also this international consensus among experts that it would bring an objective measure of the quality and reliability of a plain language projects. Because, without surprise, people tend to think that it is easy to be clear, that you can improvise it. It is also very subjective to, when you don't have a methodology to measure it, to say if something is or not clear. And I was telling you before we started this interview, Haneli, that most of the people agree that legal documents are hard to understand, but most of them also think that they write clearly. The problems are others, but that's not possible if most of the legal documents are hard to understand. So it was really to bring this, to strengthen the field of plain language, to have an objective measure and methodology. And finally, also because, and this is maybe more for the plain legal language part, because just so you know, there will be work on plain legal language. It will start in June. So we'll have a standard also under this plain language,
So that's like an umbrella, and then there's
exactly. There will be
perfect.
umbrellas. There will be actually design also. So there will be an umbrella for plain legal language. The works are starting in June. So, there are a lot of plain legal language obligations in the law. We all know about privacy policies that have to be clear now. So this is kind of an international thing. But, we have in Canada also obligations for insurance policies or prospectus. I don't know how you say that in English, but whatever, in the financing world. And the problem is that without a plain language standard that explains the methodology to ensure clearness, well, these plain legal language obligations become subjective and have much less impact, and they exist for a reason, to protect the consumers, to protect an industry, whatever, to protect someone, and to make sure the consent is also valid. So to us, it was very important for us. When I mean us, I wasn't there when they first started to think about that. But for this plain language community, it was very important to find a way to make this expertise more official,
so that it's not so subjective, but there are objective measures for it. Yeah,
exactly. And maybe it's important also to precise that there are actually 3 levels of ISO standards. You have so technical reports, you have standards for guidance, and you have standards that are mandatory. For example, car seat, for children would be mandatory. And these are, known as being normative. Plain language standard is for guidance. So you use the word should to guide users towards what the standard aims to help them achieve. But still, not because it's only guidance that it's less prestigious. It's still an ISO standard, and it could become eventually, a guidance standard can become a mandatory standard eventually. Sometimes it's the first step. So yeah, that's about so this is about what is the ISO, but you asked me also why we thought it was important. So to bring this seriousness and this credibility.
why did it take so long? Why has the journey been so long? The work started in 2007, so it's been like 16 years.
Yeah, it's a very long process. I think the process for writing, for drafting, was about 2 years. Just But I told you the discussion really started in 2007, and by the time we had also the first step was to find kind of an international consensus on a definition of what is plain language. So the community, the plain legal community, worked hard on that, and on also so yeah, just to let you know how it started. So there was 3 international organizations: Clarity, okay, which I am a vice president, and which promotes plain legal language around the world; Plain, which promotes plain language in anything, administrative things, scientific documents, legal documents, whatever; and Center for Plain Language, which promotes plain language more in North America. And in 2008, these 3 organizations decided to form the International Plain Language Working Group, which then became International Plain Language Federation. Okay, Plain Language Federation is a key player in this ISO. They have a website now. So these 3 international organizations, Clarity, Plain, and Center for Plain Language, are members of this federation. And they decided to create that federation to work on common projects, among which ISO. There will be afterwards certification, official trainings on plain language. So there's kind of an agenda for this federation. And it's really because obviously these 3 international associations have common interests in promoting plain language and also ensuring the seriousness, the credibility of the expertise. So all these 3 organizations are connected to the ISO working group, but it's really the federation that led the initiative and is the key reference today. ISO does not just decide to develop a new standard, okay? It's not ISO who decided to do a plain language standard. It really responds to a request from a specific industry. For example, right now, the plain language industry. And an industry that is interested in having a standard has to communicate have to communicate their need to a national standardized body. So we have all national body standardization body. I'm not sure how you say that in English, but whatever. The equivalent of ISO, but at a national level. Yes. And so you have to contact one national body, and then this national body contacts the ISO. So just all this process is long, and we've decided it would be the Australian national body that would contact ISO and prepare the file. Why Australia? Because one of the key players in this initiative is Christopher Bamford, a lawyer, brilliant expert in plain language, and he is actually Australian. And Australia is also very advanced in plain language in general, but also plain legal language. So it came from Australia. And then, standards are then written by volunteers experts. Okay, so they are all appointed by their national standard bodies. So, for example, my business partner will be part of the Works for Plain Legal Language, and he had to be appointed by Canadian national standard bodies. It is a very structured and rigorous process. There are, steps you have to follow. So it is a long process to make sure it is not only an excellent product, so you have a lot of checks and balances, but you also have strict rules about how you can participate, to ensure the expertise of people involved and not merely interest. General interest in plain language, for example. And you also have broader inputs. For example, the working group of plain language in ISO is part of a bigger committee language and terminology. And by being part of this bigger committee, you ensure input from people in connected fields. And it helps make sure the document will work in as many countries and sectors as possible. So, and once you have a first draft, you have to have a consensus within the working group for a draft, and then they send it to, for example, members of the 3 organizations with our liaison organization to the ISO working group. And then the members of the organizations have to give their opinion, have to comment the draft. So it go back to the working groups. It's a long process to really
just so that the long process is not, because it sounds like, because it has taken so long, it sounds like there must be something behind the scenes, like disagreement or some challenges, but it's just that the process, there are so many players in the process, and you want to be really careful that you actually consider everything that's going on in the process.
Actually, for sure, there are always discussions, point of views, and this is good. Actually, you have to have different kind of opinion, experience, and expertise around the table. So this what makes at the end the standard real international consensus. But for real behind the scenes stories, you'll have to invite Christopher Bamford because I was in part of the, you said at the end that I was very closely involved in the drafting. I was in the working group drafting committee. My business partner will be for the legal one. So you'll have to invite Christopher Bamford, and I'm sure he'll have interesting information. And I actually don't know either if it's confidential or not, because there is a lot of thing about ISO that is confidential in the process, which is
you need to secure secure the process. I know that you can't show us the standard yet because it's not published, but what can you tell us about the content? Can you highlight some of the key elements, for example, of plain language according to the standard?
Yes. I told you about the definition of plain language. That was the first step before starting the works on the ISO standard. And, I'm just going to tell you about that. Common definition we have in the community. So a communication is in plain language if its wording, structure, and design are so clear that the intended audience can easily find what they need, understand what they find, and use that information. Okay, so you have really, also the fact of finding what they need. And so I was telling you earlier about the expression plain language. People tend to think it's about, simple words and short sentences, but it's actually a methodology, and the standards show and describe that methodology to make sure your content actually respond to the needs, exactly like the legal design. So to the needs and expectations of the readers or of the users, considering their bias, their state of mind, their experience, personal experience, so many characteristics and factors. So of course, part of this, part of the guidelines, part of the principles in the ISO standards is you have to know your reader. You have to know, different characteristic, but also, where the reader will read the document. Will they read it on paper, on the iPhone, on what support will they read? What kind of technology will they use? Do they have time to read that content? Actually, you have 5 pages, you have 10 pages. Do they really have time to read all of that? And if not, what will be the solution? What will be the strategy to make sure they read the right information? So, how much time do they have to read what you give them? Can they really stay focused, considering where they read it, the moment they read it, the subject they're reading, actually? So a lot of factors. Are they really interested in that document? Yes, it is important. Yes, it has financial impact for them. But are they really deeply interested in reading it? So, the emotional state also, what is the state of mind, and also, so a lot of factors to get to know your reader. Along the way in the principles, of course, you also have, the techniques to write clearly. Oh, they seem so easy. For example, writing short sentences.
Use easy words.
Easy words, avoid jargon, but stay precise. So
Exactly.
it's hard. You
It is a new language. It is a
it
new.
is a new language, but most people who enter the world of plain language, and most professionals and lawyers who start plain language find it intellectually stimulating. It is so stimulating to try to explain things clearly. It is hard, but it also points out what is ambiguous, what is not that clear to us either. At the end, we thought we knew about it, but when you try to explain it, that's when you realize that you don't necessarily understand all the
Exactly.
the facets of the concept, for example. So, and of course, in this methodology, at the end, you have, to evaluate the document. How can you be so sure that people can easily use that content and understand that content? Well, you have to test. So, exactly like in legal design, also. And, maybe have some, establish in your organization also some, how can I say, some criteria is on, obviously maybe it's hard to always test everything at the same level. You can do small tests, you can do bigger tests, but sometimes just have criteria in your organization for, okay, depending on the complexity of the documents, depending on, how many people does that document will reach, how many people, is it, just a small portion of your clientele or not? What is the impact of that document in their personal or professional life? So just to set criteria on which document, and in what context should you necessarily test it, and not test it only once, especially when it's a very important document with important impact, but make sure that you test it, periodically. Make sure that your readers, your users don't change, that some characteristic of factors that you had established at the beginning have changed over time, because society change, people change, our reading habits change. So just to make sure you stay all the time connected to those readers. So
So
that's
those
about it.
are. So if you think about your own work and the work that you do in your agency, I suppose that these are the methods that you use as well in your own work, like work
Oh
with the
yeah.
users and do the user research.
Yeah, totally. And it's just interesting because we have, obviously, now that I'm part of the legal design methodology, and we have UX designers in the team. The UX designers are just,
Yes.
it's an amazing combination with the plain language and writing expertise, and with the legal expertise. It's And so now we have a big focus on research, on testing, on interviewing readers to understand their characteristic, but also to map user journey, understand what is the actual reading or user journey with the specific document, but also to think of solutions to improve that journey and map an optimized journey. So either for paper or web documents. So we have a big focus on that part, and we can actually have big budgets just to do that part. We've just started one where we'll do only this kind of discovery phase of the reader, of the users, and then some ideation of the new mapping, the new user journey. And so not even do the whole conception of the thing, just ideation. And it's about 140 American dollar, 130,000 American dollars. So just to tell you about, it is important, and more
That's so
companies
perfect.
are starting to see it as very valuable in their work. And after with ChatGPT coming in, very interesting. Also, I'm sure
I was
you've talked
hoping
about.
that you would mention that.
Well, actually, I find it so interesting because we've started, using it especially for rewriting documents. But obviously, everything we work with is confidential, so it's hard to really test it. But we've tested it with things that we have in our company, and it is amazing what they can do sometimes to explain complicated concept. It's better than our brain to find good analogy. They find amazing analogies. So for us, it's a new tool we could eventually use when we won't be a bit now we have the barrier of the confidentiality, but I think most of the lawyer area
most of the
yes,
lawyers have that same problem, so I'm sure that there
yeah,
will be solutions to
yeah.
tackle that.
But I find it interesting to maybe be able to optimize that part of rewriting, which can be very long, to have a tool which, do a first draft, sometimes bring, ideas that your own brain or even the brain of 10 people in your own company can find. And but to make sure, obviously, afterwards, you always need a human brain behind that. So, yeah.
Oh, that's perfect. So glad to hear some practical examples of how you use the ChatGPT also in your work.
We try to exploit as many, I think, professionals. You can't ignore it. You have to,
No,
right?
you can't.
But and plain language works. It has a powerful impact, an economic impact in private and public organizations. Just to give you a very small examples, we've worked with it's only in French here, but Commissaire à la déontologie policière. It's actually the organization here which receives complaints from the population against police officers, and we help them simplify their documents, and we just help them simplify the two first letters they sent after someone complained about a police officer behavior or act. And just by rewriting those two letters, and they have a lot of forms and letters, they have a website, they reduce the numbers of calls by 16%. So imagine they continuing that. We done that work like maybe 4 years ago, and they've been doing more, and they said the impact has been huge. But imagine if you just rewrite two key letters in the organization, you reduce by 16%. And it's a small organization, so they could feel right away that change, and the person who was receiving that call, well, she can actually put her energy and efforts in more valuable activities for the organization. So the impact is non it's so obvious when you do it. But it's an investment for the organizations, to invest in plain language. But it's an investment. It's not just throwing money away to make it beautiful and to make it, it's an investment for having economical benefits at the end.
Yeah, exactly. A perfect practical example. What are the objections or challenges that you find? Obviously, the money or budget is one issue that organizations struggle with, but
yes,
have you
of
faced
course.
other challenges?
Yeah. Well, always the same, that sometimes it's dubbing down the language, if you use simple words instead of sophisticated and long words. And I can understand, because there are some words we love when we're lawyers. We've been, studying law for so many years, and it's hard to just say, oh, I'm not going to use that word anymore when I know what it means and it's so efficient, Well, no, you can't anymore if you want to be clear and efficient. But a lot of people think it's dubbing down the language, and it's about using, good and proper language. It's not about, text. It's not like texting. And also, obviously, people say that it's not possible to be legally precise and plain at the same time, which is not true. It's not easy. The methodology is important. The process has to be rigorous, and you have to be, that's also why it is multidisciplinary, the word. But you're not only one person deciding that you'll change that word for another word, and you have to make sure when you change it that maybe you test it and make sure that the interpretation is right. Same thing if you use visual things, make sure that the interpretation is also is right. But to be honest, any plain language professional can say that most of legal documents are themselves ambiguous and not that precise. So actually, what studies has revealed is that actually plain language make them, when it's well done, seriously done, is actually make the legal document actually more precise and less ambiguous and less with less possibilities for interpretation. But you still hear them. It's normal, I guess. People who don't know about it, who haven't experienced it, will say that. But once you work with professional, you realize that it's a serious process and that has very valuable results.
Yeah, and it's also like if the criteria for a clear document are those that the user is able to find the information and understand the information and use the information. So there is no like this lawyer ego involved that it has to feel right for the lawyers.
Yeah,
that's not the point.
No, and it's actually hard because we work a lot with lawyers within the companies. We work in so different documents. We really work with the legal professional with the expertise, and in the organization they have to make sure that they expose the company to the lower risk possible. So it's really hard for them to have the hat of lower risk and to have the hat of innovation and find out the way to do, and so that's why it has to be a teamwork with everyone bearing their own hats, and find a consensual solution at the end, and test, obviously, so people feel more secure.
Exactly.
I don't want to leave without telling you about this author. I told you about Christopher, but Joseph Kimball, Professor Joseph Kimball. He's an American professor. He's one of the, oh my God, key player in the plain language world. He's at the Michigan University of Law, I think. He has a column also in that university about plain language, and he wrote a lot about plain language. For example, the great myth that plain language is not precise. You want to read about that? Read Joseph Kimball. Answering the critiques of plain language is another book he wrote. So he has, and also all the writing for dollars, writing to please is also writing for dollars, writing to please is also about the advantages of writing in plain language. So Joseph Kimball would be good starting point for anyone who wants to know more about the plain language world.
Oh, thank you. Good resources. That's always a great starting point where to learn more. Would you have any other maybe advice if someone
Yes.
is interested in starting using plain language?
Well, become member of the two international association. It's really not expensive. Clarity, which is for plain legal language. Any legal designer should be a member of that association. There is a journal every year published by this association, Clarity Journal. So you can go on the website, you'll see them. Plain also. So become a member of those two. You'll be informed of what's happening, and you can, obviously, it's a community. So ask about the best books about specific topics you want to learn. So also buy the ISO standard. I think you can actually buy a draft right now, but it's supposed to be officially published in June, well, in summer 2023.
So there is no exact date yet when
it's
it will be
supposed to
out.
be June, but
Okay.
it's really supposed to be June,
Anything
but
can happen.
but it's not this. I don't have the specific date. So becoming, members of these two association, Clarity, Plain, buying the ISO standard, and just being part of the International Plain Language Conference. Also, the next one is in Argentina. 27, 28, 29, just a little bit after the Legal Design Summit. So maybe hard to be at both, but at least being on one in distance, the other one in person. But I think these would be my the three doors I would open to start with the plain language world and get to know the really brilliant and interesting and generous professional in that community, because they are so generous of their knowledge and expertise. They share a lot. They've been helping me a lot for so many years. Joseph Kimball, Christopher Bamford. So yeah.
Yeah, and what we discussed before we went live is that there is so much knowledge, so much expertise and experience in plain language field. So just to get curious and start reading and start reaching out to people. So that's
yes. And maybe just I want to, before so we end, thanking the president of Clarity, Julie Clement. She's the president of Clarity. She's been editing before becoming president. She was the editor-in-chief of the Clarity Journal for so many years. She is also brilliant, and she helped me a lot understanding so much about the world, and also the ISO standard for this podcast. So to give you good and precise information as much as possible. So,
great.
It's a teamwork.
Hey, it's been so much fun to talk to you. Where can people learn more about you and your work if they want to reach out?
You asked me that, and I was like, well, that's a good question. I guess the best way would be on LinkedIn, because I'm not very up to date. I'm not very social media. I should be more, but I always get my messages from LinkedIn. And on Clair also, we have a page on Clair on LinkedIn, and we post a lot, so you'll know more about what's happening with me or my business partners or my team, and about Clair also, which is in the legal design world also. So yes, I guess that would be the best way.
Oh, great. Hey, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me and talk to us. It's been so much fun and so important topic.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
And thank you everybody for watching and listening, and we'll get back next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.